morning. So slight change of mood as we get into more serious matters about how we're going to build our future. So I'm trained as an architect, but my passion is cities, and I'm going to demonstrate. I'm going to demonstrate how our future lies in cities. Very quickly, I'm going to run through some statistics. This has been true for almost a decade now. Most of us live in cities. In India, that proportion is a little lesser. We're only 37%, but we're going to be there. We're going to be there in another decade or so. Most of the people who are going to come into cities are going to come into Asia and Africa. That means a lot of the urban migration that is going to happen across the world is going to happen within these two continents. Just in India, you're going to have 500 million people coming into cities. That's going to double the size, not just double the size of cities like Bombay or Delhi, but smaller cities are going to massively expand to sort of accommodate the number of people that are in here. And Dr. Batra mentioned that there's a lot of growth happening, and that means there's a lot of economic activity, there's manufacturing. All of this leads to a few things. There's going to be 1 billion square feet of covered area being constructed over the next decade in India. It's over, it's close to what? 100 million square feet a year. These are unheard of numbers globally. Within this background, you have the environmental degradation, global warming happening. This is partly due to the construction industry, because construction industry is the 3rd largest polluter in the world. And India is currently the 3rd largest producer of greenhouse gases, but there is, our per capita is still very low. And for instance, in the US, the per capita is 10 times what it is here in India. But we're going towards that. We want to consume, we all want washing machines, we all want air conditioners, and so we want that life, and we're on the path to more consumption. And being ranked 3rd is simply because of the lower per capita. When seen as a total, as India becomes more prosperous, we're bound to be the largest energy consumer in the world. Within this background, how do you build? Right? As an architect, what choices do you make? And what are the things that you derive your fundamental questions on? This is a very famous photograph by Johnny Miller. It's an aerial photograph of Bombay. And it describes the 2 ways our cities are built. One is formal, organized, it sort of works within the structures of government and technology and professionalism. And one is self-built. And a lot of our country is being self-built. So even though we are architects and working in the professional domain, what is our role in informing the practices that happen in the informal domain? So with that, I'm going to leave this up here. I'm going to ask Rahul to come and join me. And then I have a couple of questions for him. I was saying buildings consume a lot of energy, both to build and to operate. Efficiency is one way that we can drive sustainability. So what are your learnings for driving efficiency in making buildings?
Can I deviate from that a little bit? 2 things. One is, I think we need to pay more attention to this migration that's going to happen, rather than the individual buildings we'll come to. That's more in our control. But if we're saying 90 million people are going to move into the cities in India, I think it's a very serious thing for us to ask, where are they moving and where should they move? We know why they're moving. It's for economic reasons. There's a push from the village. The other question we need to ask is the world changing? With this whole work from home, can there be a model? We've idealized the village over the centuries. Can there be a model by which we can be as productive as a city is by being decentralized? If you take in India, growth happens kind of on autopilot. And the maximum growth, as we all know, is not happening in Bombay or the large cities, but it's happening in the outskirts of the smaller towns. It's the outskirts of Solapur, Akola, all these tier 3 or tier 4 towns. That's where the growth is happening, and a haphazard growth. So if, for example, if in Maharashtra, there's 110 million people, 37% approximately, maybe a little bit more live in the cities, but people are moving to the census towns, which are outside tier 2 to tier 4. On a macro level, I think the government needs to promote places where they want people to move and give them amenities and create that infrastructure. We don't want more people to move to the Mumbai metropolitan region. And the reason for that is really water. We don't have enough water in this region. So, increasing FSI or creating one more infrastructure like this new 6 cities from there's an industrial belt being created from Virar to the Alibag with 6 new towns. These kind of policies is something we need to question. And probably we need to look at Europe and Germany in particular, which is, decentralized. There's very few cities in Germany which are more than 1 million. And many are close to 1 million, right? So they have growth centers all over based on water, and they've built along the rivers. So we need to not only look at town planning, but now really integrate town and country planning into one. And this whole thing, and Hafiz was supposed to be here earlier, so I was looking forward to a conversation with him, because he's always one to talk about we need to go taller. If 80% of the people of Maharashtra move from the countryside to a city or to an urban space, we need to calculate how much land do we need, because we are always short of land. So if we calculate based on 10,000 people per square kilometer, we need only 3% of the land mass to accommodate everybody. So if you need only 3%, and if it's at 10,000 people per square kilometer, which is FSI 1. It's FSI 1 and it's ground plus 3, ground plus 4. So, we can all have pretty decent lives with enough open space, etc. If we are not concentrating too much. Concentrating creates its own problems of heat island effect and therefore needing air conditioning much more, etc. It leads to all those problems. So also, if we can deal with our urban planning in a way that people can walk to work, you're building 15-minute neighborhoods. So these would go a long, long way to minimizing our use of energy. So I think looking at the macro, looking at, okay, migration is happening, but let it happen in this way rather than ad hoc, which is happening now.
So let's just unpack that a bit, right? So we have these two models here in India. One is, of course, the way you build Bombay, and which is very high density, high FSI. And then you have the example of Delhi, which is low rise, a lot of sprawl, a lot of car dependence. And I want to pick up on what you said and ask you whether you would choose car dependence over a city like Bombay.
Whether I choose?
Car dependence So in Delhi, there is a lot of car dependence, right?
Yeah.
Because of the sprawl, because of the low rise, etc.
But I wouldn't look at, somehow in urban design, this magic number of 10,000 people per square kilometer, Delhi is, the density is much lower. It's probably close to 2 or 2.5, right? Mumbai is 22. So if you're looking at 10,000, so Paris is 6, London is 8. So we're looking at, even in these clusters, having 30% open space, 30% in an urban setting, and even if you're using only 20% of the land to work and live, you can do it in ground plus floor. So it's important that there is a certain density, because then it's easier to walk, right? Delhi is not a very walkable, at least New Delhi isn't a very walkable place, so that's not an ideal model, because you have to use a car or a public transportation. No, but so we need, for it to be walkable, ground plus 4.
So you mentioned that tier 2 and tier 3 cities need to be the focus of development, so that, because no one city can absorb so many people. What sort of capacity building do you think that governments need to do at the tier 2 level in order to have infrastructure, in order to have, access to, so that they can transform from, let's say, census towns into, let's say, smaller cities?
Yeah, so I think needs to first identify probably 10 cities at a time, which are spread out based on the availability of water, connectivity, some infrastructure already there, industry already available. So once that kind of mapping is done, probably, give incentives to people to move there in a planned development. Presently, what's happening is that farmers on the periphery are just converting their land into a chawl, or, informal settlements are coming up there. So instead of that, use the Gujarat model, which is, land on the periphery, plan it to be denser, put in the roads that need to go in, don't just leave it to the public to do on their own. Just have planned developments to attract people.
So one significant barrier is that there isn't a model out there, because, no one else in the world has this problem. No one else has so many people moving to so many cities right now. The closest example we have is maybe Nigeria, where we have a large, prosperous and becoming more prosperous population moving to cities. What you see instead in the media is examples like Neom, right? And the Saudi Arabian mile-long city.
No, so that's ridiculous. So I think we need to plan wherein you're integrating nature, and this whole thing of rural-urban needs to be better integrated. I feel the correct model is city and country fingers, so that you've got dovetailing, right? So you've got a city which is long, and then agriculture or a forest coming in, and then you can alternate them. So that, and if these bands are, a kilometer wide, just roughly diagrammatically, and people can walk, and if it's linear, your public transportation can run. I think they are doing it because of the extreme climate that they face and the desert, so they need to very intensively develop and bring water into a very, very thin, it's about water at the end of the day. The plants, etc., would grow only because of the water. Whereas we don't have that problem. So identifying, growth is happening along major vehicular routes. So where the hinterland is connected to a small town, it's growing linear along there. So I think it's very easy for the government to set up along these roads town planning schemes, or the way Nagpur has done, for example, where they have, Nagpur originally I think was only about 120 square kilometers. They've notified 620 kilometers around and built 2 ring roads, and therefore urbanized. So putting that infrastructure in initially is something the government can do, and bringing that land under the governance of the corporation rather than the panchayat. So that change has to happen.
So, if you harness the power of policy and, like you mentioned, incentives, the thing what happens is India is a lot of the cities get built when no one is looking, right? A lot of it is informal, a lot of it is, you know, with outside the purview of regulation. How do you incentivize good behavior as far as city making is concerned in the informal sector?
Well, I think there have been many models in the past, sites and services, because when people are building on their own, they're building incrementally. So in the past, and what's happened in the recent past is the government has kind of withdrawn from any housing, at least in Bombay. So there's no scheme, or there's no.
So it's no longer a public good in that sense.
Yeah, and in fact they're seeing it as a profit making. The government, 30% of any project, you're paying the government. So the government is, and SRA is the only game in town. So the government and MHADA in particular needs to step back. It has a responsibility to fulfill needs of housing in Maharashtra, and I think it leads us to other topics about democracy and what we demand of the governments. And I think demanding that, you know, there is so much you need to do, at least the sites and services, the roads, sites, services need to be provided, and people will build on their own. But that minimum needs to be done. Presently, the density that government is expecting in SRAs is 1,000 people per hectare, which is ridiculously high. I mean, even the national standard is, I think, 600, but they're willing to go to 1,000. So we're just asking for problems. See, the other thing to look at is that where did all this begin? All this began when we stopped being hunter-gatherers. I mean, when I say all this, I mean all this. Our culture as a whole, where did it start? Right? It started when we actually thumbed our nose to God and says, I don't care, you're not going to provide for me, I'm going to provide for myself. And I'm going to farm. And that's when everything started. And everything started with all our health problems, etc. started with the one thing, which is density. So controlling density is crucial. And that's the one thing government is not doing in the city today.
So, just to pick up on what you said about density. Density is the new Ebenezer Howard, right? It's the new way to plan cities. Light rail is supposed to run around dense neighborhoods. You mentioned walkable neighborhoods of 15 minutes. What are we missing here? Why isn't everybody building more dense neighborhoods? Why are we still building, you know, US-style suburban villas, etc.? Why isn't it happening?
I think it requires a different kind of capital for that to happen, and planning. So there are two things here, right? We are building ultra dense in Bombay and the cities, and we're building urban sprawl in smaller towns where you're still building villas, etc. So really, I think it's about the government and regulation because going forward to build a sustainable town, you know, you can have, it's easy to have urban sprawl now, but that will only deal to higher consumption and more the energy use, because you know your pipelines have to be longer, your power has to turn longer, the distances you move are longer. So I think again it's for the government to say that this is the sweet spot. This is the range of density that we want to encourage, and we're going to discourage anything else, and incentives is probably the way to go.
So, to some extent, China missed the boat on dense urban development that is sustainable, because they followed a Western model of development which was car-centric. India still has the chance, and you know, India must do it, otherwise we're all going to hell. You know, what is your one? If you had one wish list to instantly transform urban landscape, what would it be? What would be that one thing that you would implement immediately?
It's two things. Can I say two things? Two things. One is, actually one, we stop spending any more money on roads for cars. Literally zero budget. No more money. And
so no more coastal highway.
Till footpaths are built, because 50% of the people in the city walk to work. I mean, we know those things. So till footpaths are not built properly and are wide enough, we don't spend any money on roads. Also, you know, we give enough space for the vehicle without sacrificing the footpath. I think that's the key thing. Also, spending more money on public transportation and the low-hanging fruit. I mean the BST bus, not a metro or anything like that, just the BST bus. Because right now our priorities are tremendously warped. You know, if you take the numbers, you know, 12.5 lakh people commute by bus. 45,000 people commute by car on the western side using the sea link. 45,000 people. And we're spending 12,500 crores for these 45,000. And we're not willing to subsidize the BST by anything. And that road is so expensive that you can't charge toll for it. It has to be free, because if you charge toll, it would be 700 rupees at the least. So nobody would go. So that's why it has to be free, which means that these 45,000 are getting 700 rupees subsidy every time they go on it. You know? So our priorities right now are completely warped. And it's also, I guess, about not being able to articulate what we really want, the kind of city we really want. The aspiration is everybody wants a car, and that's kind of believed, but that's not what everybody wants. Right? Everybody just wants a convenient way to get from point A to point B. So the second thing is to have one authority which looks at transportation as a whole. Right now, you've got suburban rail, so you've got central, western, who don't talk to each other. You've got the BST, now you've got the Metro Rail Corporation, you've got PWD manning certain roads, you've got BMC manning certain roads, and nobody looking at the footpaths. So, and none of these talk to each other. So having one authority, and there's many a city in the world where when you start looking at it as, not as terms of traffic, but in terms of transportation, you kind of look at the whole problem differently. So there is there is a recommendatory body right now, but it doesn't have any teeth because they don't control the budget. So whoever controls the money controls everything. So having a transportation authority who controls the budget is
Like
important.
TFL, like TFL, for instance, Transport for London, controls, you know, both the tube and the buses, etc.
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, I would completely agree. You must deprioritize the car, right? And you must have people who are working in silos. They need to, you know, talk to each other when it comes to mobility within cities. So that's great. I think, I mean, I would look to you for any more questions if you have some. Please, we have a gentleman over there who would like to ask a question.
But thanks, Rahul, for bringing it up the concentration and the water aspect. I've been saying it for a long time that, you know, we are a water-rich country, and every March we stare at a drought. But the problem that might be more relevant to solve is to push the economic activity outwards, not just the water situation and the X number of people per hectare or whatever. Because if you are bringing economic activity to the center of the towns, the new cities, old cities, tier 2, tier 3, you're going to end up with the London of Dickens, you know, whichever way it happens, whether planned or unplanned. So is there a policy shift or a policy focus towards pushing economic activity out, you know, factories or whatever it is? We already have villages, we already have centers of structured life.
So, I mean, to some extent, the idea of the 100 smart cities was to generate 100 centers of activity which aren't really urban centers. But I'm going to let you answer that.
Well, building a new city is really hard. So, but building on what's already there and encouraging. So, a few years ago, we had done a study based on density, water, transportation, industry. Which are the cities that the Maharashtra government should propose, should kind of invest in more and de-invest in others? And, you know, but these are not, this doesn't win elections. What wins elections is projects, etc. So we need bigger forums or people who understand that this is important and kind of stop investing so much in Mumbai and start investing elsewhere and promoting that. So yeah, so that seriously needs to happen, but maybe it will begin to happen as different regions get leaders who are more powerful and can demand that, right? Can demand investment in their regions. Also demand that the water from their region should remain where it is. Right now, Mumbai gets water from Nasik all the way, right? So changing that and kind of planning for water, you know, this is where water is, so this is where we have growth. It's probably a good way to start. The other thing, you know, since we're on this, I'm just I don't know, cities pollute, rural areas we believe don't, but the biggest absorber of carbon is the leaf, right? And now we know that to sequester probably all the carbon that's extra in the atmosphere, if we just change the way we farm. It seems when we till the land, that's actually the worst thing you can do. And for India in particular, the pollution it creates, the dust it creates, but the sequencer of carbon that doesn't happen for the time when the land is brown. If that were to change for, and this is the French government and people in France have said that if 5% of the world were to shift to no-till farming, that you do not till your land, but you inject your seed in and let the green cover remain. If 5% were to change, then all the extra carbon which is floating around will get absorbed.
Yeah, there is a whole movement about wine and biodynamic. I was in France for a few years, and they are leading the way in this direction. So you're onto something there.
Right. Yeah, there's a wonderful film, right? The documentary, Kiss the Ground, Kiss the Earth, which talks about this.
Rahul and Amit, you guys are creative guys. Design thinkers look at world a little differently. That's how they come up. They observe things, they deeply think about them. The one issue that has now come to Bombay issues in Delhi is quality of air. And every month for 2 months we discuss it. If that is not important for my family, for us, for my children, then I don't think what is more important. We talk of health, design. Is there a solution to solving that? Because look at the quality of air in Bombay now. The vehicular pollution is as bad as Delhi or worse. Is there a solution? I know you're not an expert on environment. I understand.
So I would like to sort of point out that the static emissions that we have, which is things that happen all the time, building pollution, vehicular pollution, transit-oriented pollution, they have a certain effect on air pollution, but air pollution goes up and down based on wind patterns, right? And for instance, I flew in from Delhi this morning, and the PMI indicator in my house said 12 for 2.5. And it will be 900 when there's no wind. So a lot of it is external factors which is not really related to what our everyday life is. But yes, the fact that we generate so much dust is an issue.
Generating dust is, and controlling dust in the construction industry. Presently, most of Bombay is dug up. The coastal road is a huge thing. Many metros are happening, and I think that, so if during construction we can control dust, it'll go, I think, 30% better air quality. But if you look at maps, so I was in rural Kerala, end of Jan, and I was looking at the AQI over there, and it was 200. I said, I'm in rural Kerala. What's going on? Why is the air quality so bad here? So, India gets huge chunks of land get covered by dust clouds. And that's to do, so it's to do with construction and controlling it, but overall it's to do with farming and burning. Indians just love to burn things. Anywhere you go, you see things being burned, right? So controlling burning, whether it's on farmland or in the city, and controlling dust, or letting things be green, and not allowing dust to be around. We haven't, all the rules are in place about a construction site, how they need to control dust, etc. The environmental permission given for the coastal road, in fact, had said no material will move on the road. Everything will come by barge. There's nobody to monitor it. Everything is moving on the road, and there's dust, all over. So we have the rules, we have everything, but we just don't monitor it enough. I think with enough people falling ill, we probably will make enough of a noise that some of the rules will be followed. But as a democracy, we need to demand these things, right? So keep saying this again and again and again, that when they come to us to ask for our vote, We need to say, these are the things we want. Are you going to do these things? We have to be ready with what we are asking for and be clear about that. And, so document that these are the things we want. Are you going to do this for us? That's the only way things are going to be done, because we'll get a government we deserve.
Hi, I'm a car designer, a transportation designer. And a lot of the picture you've painted is the problem in urban planning is transportation. So what are architects doing to create a discussion with the people who are actually designing transportation? What are urban planners? You also talked about busting up the silos in urban planning, urban infrastructure management. So what are urban planners and architecture doing to engage with car companies or transportation companies or designers of transportation to improve urban living, urban solutions for the future, and making transportation part of the solution and not the problem?
Well, what we're really doing is seeing how little can we depend on mechanized transportation. How can we minimize that? That's the main aim, right? Because we already have 50% of the people in the city who walk to work, right? Most of the pollution created is created by 12% of the people who have private cars. If that 12% can become 8, it's a huge difference. Right? So it's really
actually most of the pollution is coming from the movement of goods and services and trucking. And in a country, a lot of what our consumer society of moving goods and services, moving goods and services, shipping items that we buy from Amazon made in China, moving those across seas, getting them to truck, getting the guy to come deliver them on his scooter, all that pollution that we are creating, most of it is transportation and other services like ambulances, school buses, essential staff, fire engines. So the issue, and this is why I bring my point of transportation design, the issue is not about private cars or non-private cars, people walking to work or living in a 15-minute city or not. The issue is, how do we transport goods and services? You also mentioned about how do you transport construction equipment? How do we transport, do we use a barge? Is it not as polluting as going to take the truck? The truck's taking debris, other trucks are even taking the debris away. So it's the transportation solution to the problem, and it's not about our personal transportation. The metro is not the solution, neither is the ceiling, unless it's...
I think we're out of time, so I'm just going to try one quick attempt to answer that question. We're not demonizing the car, right? The idea is that cities have been built around personal transport, right? That mode of development is unsustainable. You have to build cities around integrated transport that gets you from point to point. Maybe you use your car, maybe you don't, but you should be able to get to point quickly and as efficiently as possible. Yes, the car is a small percentage, but it represents this sort of mode of development which every city then aspires to. Everybody makes a ring road, everybody builds flyovers, everybody builds underpasses. You don't need any of that stuff. Someone in the car industry has famously said, maybe the right role of the car is what the horse has become. It's no longer a mode of transport, it's just something you enjoy once in a while. So we'll wrap it up at that, because I think you're waiting. And so thank you very much.